I was talking to someone on Twitter last night, and we're just, stop schmoozing. They sent me a message, direct message, and I was in the middle of writing a quiz. I'm teaching Jewish history in yeshiva, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and I was writing a quiz for the boys. And it's not just Jewish history, general history, all kinds of little mix of Jewish history, general ideas. Excuse me. And this person who wrote to me, another from person, they said, history is very interesting. And what he said was, that history repeats itself. That's the interesting thing about it. I said, from history, you could see Hashgacha Pratis, you could see divine providence. I mean, when we look at the words of many of our founding fathers in the United States, the word that they used, the term, 2 words, or sometimes just 1 word really, that they would use to refer to God would be providence. Hashgacha Pratis, that providence delivered them to this, to that, whatever it was. As I've discussed many times before, not only the founding fathers, but later presidents as well, and other great men in our history have seen providence as a key issue in our history, in the history of the United States. Now, excuse me. The idea of history repeating itself is a little bit of a different thing, which I'm not, it's something that has happened throughout history, that history repeats itself. It was General Santana who was famously quoted, I'll paraphrase it, he said that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. The joke they'll usually say is if you don't learn from history, if you don't learn history, you'll repeat it. You'll have to be left back a grade and repeat it again. But I see people who are looking always for patterns in history and are convinced that the patterns will repeat just exactly like the previous patterns, and I kind of question that idea, because certain things do repeat and certain things don't. We have a concept that brought for sure in the Rishonim, the Ramban, Nachmanides mentions, and it seems to have already in Chazal and Midrashim. This idea is Ma'isa Avos Siman Labanim. It's mentioned already in Chazal, that whatever happened to the patriarchs was a sign to the future generations. So Abraham went to Egypt, and that is similar to the Israelites going into Egypt. Jacob went to Laban's house, to Laban's house. Yaakov Avinu went to Laban's house, Laban's house, and and that's a sign for the Jews going into exile. Jacob comes back and encounters Esau, and that's a sign of the dealings of the Jews with the Romans. And all of these things were an archetype for what would be in the future. That's not really history repeating itself, however. That's more of a prophetic ministry, in a sense. That these that our patriarchs living their life, they set a course for their descendants, for the Israelites, for the Jewish people, and and that's certainly, an idea that Judaism embraces. It's not a dogmatic idea, but it's certainly one that we find, in the commentaries and so forth, and it's generally accepted, and rightfully so. And it's it's not something that is really argued about. But I like I said, I'm a but there was this Poel Demyoini, that the prophets would do, that they would do an action to demonstrate their prophecy. Their prophecies were not always verbal prophecies, written prophecies, but often they were physical prophecies, that by certain actions that they did, they represented the prophetic ministry, and that was and that is similar in a certain ways to the ideas of Maisa Avos L'Banim, and in a way, even quite often we say even tzaddikim today, they'll have in their ministry this idea, giving a gift to someone, giving shirayim, or giving Chanukah geld, the gebetchte matbeya, things like this, to be a poel demyoini, that by virtue of their actions, they're delivering a blessing. Meaning, they'll give you, a nickel or a quarter, and that, or a half a dollar, or whatever it is, that is a gift they'll give you, and that from that, or Lubavitch Rebbe would give dollars, but that was for tzedakah, that wasn't as a segula, although most people kept it like that. But then they would give another dollar to tzedakah. That's all. But that I don't know if that was really the inyan to keep it, but whatever it was. But many tzaddikim, they have this inyan, especially Chanukah time, to give out coins, Chanukah geld, but also it's a gebetchte matbeya, it's a blessed coin, and that's a poel demyoini, that by this action they're wishing that God will grant you wealth. I remember going to Hasidish Tish on Chanukah, and the Rebbe, who I'm close with, he gave a donut in the right hand and a coin in the left hand. I still have the coin actually, and he quoted from Proverbs where it says, that in the right hand will be long life, and the left hand is riches and honor. And I was like, well, is a donut really long life? It's not even so healthy. And whatever it was, this was in Jerusalem. They gave a half a shekel. Is that riches and honor? But the thing is, it's a poel demyoini. It's an action which is a blessed action, that through this, and this is something that, again, we say it goes back to the prophets, it goes back to the Bible. Joseph, the whole idea was shirayim, giving portions from your own plate. We see Joseph gave to his brothers from his face, it says, portions. So it's very similar to what the Hasidic practice of giving shirayim and so forth. But in any event, that's not really what I want to talk about now. The question is, does history repeat itself? I kind of go off on a tangent. And the answer is maybe yes, maybe no. I don't really know, but because I like to listen. Like I said, I like to listen to Glenn Beck. I have a lot of respect for him. Like I said, I feel he is a prophetic voice. That doesn't mean I believe he's a Navi. I that would be kfira. I don't believe he's a prophet. But many of the things he says come from the prophetic tradition that's in the Bible. He's reading the same Bible that we have. Sure, it might be different translation, might be certain things might be wrong in the translation, particularly the one that he might be using. But that's neither here nor there, because the point is the message generally is the same. Especially the prophetic message in the prophetic ministry. And I know, his tradition emphasizes that very much, and believes in that people can have prophetic experiences, and the lahavdol alfei avdolos, because his derech is very much attached to Avodah Zarah, but it's not it is what it is, but put that aside, it still has a basis in our scriptures, even other things that are really quite wrong, but that's just where he found himself. I often say, like, if he when he was looking for religion, one of my friends who likes to share Judaism with people, if he was around then, maybe Glenn Beck would have become a Ger Tzedek. He has a very big appreciation for Yiddishkeit, particularly for Orthodox Judaism. So it would have been quite interesting. He would probably have been a much better Jew than a lot of Jews. And I almost feel it's a shame that when he was searching for religion, that he didn't wind up in Orthodox Judaism. But to paraphrase someone, it often happens that people who come to Yiddishkeit, and have so much potential for good, once they're in Yiddishkeit, it's just not the right fit for them, and the problem is not in Yiddishkeit, the problem is not in Torah, but the problem is the Jewish community has so many problems, and there's so much we could learn from these other communities, which in certain ways are more in line. I don't mean this in a kfirdik way, but they're more in line with the values that the Torah is trying to espouse. Although the fact of the matter is, vast majority of frum people do excel, and some do, some don't, but the community becomes, I don't know, there's something that's lost. Sometimes people don't see the forest through the trees, and it's not the fault of the Torah in any way. Chas v'shalom. The Torah is Hashem Temima. The Torah of Hashem is perfect. The problem is, how do we live with the Torah? But anyway, that's also beside the point. So Glenn Beck, he's been talking about there are patterns in history, and he's always trying to develop a theory of where, because he is a student of history, and that's one thing I love about him and I appreciate about him. He's trying to establish where are these patterns? Where are we now in history? Where when we compare it to some other time in history, and where are we in? What part of the cycle are we in? I remember Meir Kahana, Hashem Yimkom Dama, Rav Meir Kahana. He was a Rav in Queens, and he was a Shiva. He was a Choshev Yid. I don't agree with all his politics, but he certainly, more in line with Torah than Glenn Beck. But I do believe that, again, that the basic values that Glenn Beck espouses do have Makar and Torah, and that's one thing like Rabbi Victor Miller used to say, is that it's not that we are finding something that's from the outside. If we find something good on the outside, because they come from us. I know that sounds ethnocentric, I know that sounds egotistical, but it's not that they got it from us. We got it from God. We didn't make it up. It wasn't the genius of the Jewish people. It was God's revelation. And there's a lot of arrogance in the Jewish community, particularly the secular Jewish community. They think they know better than everybody. Look at us. We had Einstein, and we had this and that. That's not Judaism. That's, first of all, not just because they're not frum. That's besides the point. It's because they're, the arrogance is just the opposite of what Yiddishkeit expects from us. Moshe Rabbeinu was Anav Mikol Anam. Moses was the most humble person ever lived. And this Jewish arrogance, which really produced Zionism, produced so much heresy and so many things that have caused so many problems for the Klal Yisrael, and it takes God out of the picture, and that's the problem. But the thing is that when we do have good ideas, or we hear good ideas on the outside, it's because it trickled down from our Torah. That's not fair to say that. I mean, we have I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a Kalaver Chassid, but I'm definitely a Chassid of the Kalaver Rebbe. I try to be. I don't live up to it. That's why people ask me what type of Chassid are you, and I'm not even a Chassid. What am I? I'm nothing. Who am I? I'm nobody. If you want to use Chassid in the colloquial terms, I'm a Chassid of Hashem. But but as far as Chasidus, I'm not a Chassid. I'm not a, so because I wear Streimel, I'm a Chassid. I'm not a Chassid. I'm far from him. Many people know that. I'm a horrible person. I'm a sinner, and I cause others to sin. I'm a horrible, horrible person. Anyway, but I certainly have a big devotion to the Kalaver Rebbe, Shlema, and I appreciate, I have tremendous hakar satov to the Kalaver Rebbe, who is a big tzaddik. Kalaver Rebbe Williamsburg, Moshe ben Reisel, Shlema, he's suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease, but he's so strong. It shows the power of the brain, the power of the mind. Here's a man who his body can't move, but he just talks with his eyes. I mean, it's like Stephen Hawking's, but of Rebbes, And I know whatever, but it's quite impressive, the Torah that comes out of him, just from moving his eyes, it's really quite amazing and quite impressive, and it's a blessing from God that we have such a tzaddik in our midst, who's been Makar so many people, and Altaris HaKodesh. People really don't appreciate, people who don't know him, they just think, they don't understand, who he is. He's really the tzaddik ador. I mean, they're also, Glenn Rebbe is older and he's a big tzaddik and also accomplished very similar things. I'm not being mavchin bein tzaddik le tzaddik. It could have more than one tzaddik ador, but tremendous holy man, the Kalaver Rebbe. But anyway, the old Kalaver, we all know, he brought the Kolakowski, the famous niggin Kolakowski, from out of the Klippas, because he heard a Hungarian shepherd singing this niggin, and he knew that the niggin came from the Beis Hamikdash. The Levium, the Levites, sang this in the temple in Jerusalem in ancient times, and he bought it from the shepherd, and then the shepherd forgot it, and that was the sign traditionally that it indeed was from the temple. But again, there is such a thing that Torah falls into other places, and in a way it's mizaka them as well. I don't subscribe to this very arrogant racist ideology that I hear from so many from particularly Zionists and from certain one particular group also espouses this more than others for political reasons I'm not going to mention, and I really think it comes from a misinterpretation and a misunderstanding of the Tanya, Maven Yavin, but because the Tanya is talking really about the concept. People are so quick to say that that when the Gemara says like Gali Yisrael they said, well, it's talking about Nitzaisis the Kedusha, it's not talking about actual Gerim. But so why can't that's a misunderstanding of the Ariya Kodesh saying when he's saying Nitzaisis Kedusha, the Gerim are the Nitzaisis the Kedusha, are the holy sparks. These people are the holy sparks, and really, that's beside the point. But in any event, to get back to the same thing, picking up, but I'm getting away from the point that I wanted to make. But I'm not sure, because he's trying to see, can we compare Trump? Who can we compare him to? Who is he like? Where are we in history again? What part of the cycle are we in? And there is a cyclical thing. I'm not saying there aren't cycles. The same thing, I don't know, America Hana, I was going to mention, he had a book, 40 Years. I tried reading it, I didn't read the whole thing, but the basic idea of the book was that, that there are these 40-year cycles, and, Hashem gives us 40 years a chance to come back and to do tshuva, which I think is a more hopeful and a more Jewish idea. We're not saying it's just karma that's just blind. People talk about karma. That's a Vodazara idea. Karma is impersonal. Our God is a merciful God, is a personal God, not just blind karma. There is such a thing as mercy, meaning we can do something wrong and we can fix it, and God can have mercy on us because we repented of our sins, as opposed to karma that's just like, you do good, you get good, you do bad, you get bad, and there's no hope after you do something bad. Whereas, our idea is God understands that we are imperfect, and He created us that way. He's an intelligent creator. It's not just blind forces that are impersonal and so forth. And therefore, since God created us, He understands us, He has mercy on us. And and He has a relationship with us. That's a personal relationship. And we don't need any intermediary. He doesn't have to come into any kind of avatar in order for us to have that relationship. We are able to have that relationship directly with Him as He communicated with us, as He revealed to us in the Torah. That the Torah is the avatar, even though it's never a word, but meaning that through the Torah we can have a relationship with God. We don't need to have God come into a human form in order to have a relationship with Him, as the Christians suggest. And I have respect for Christians. I'm just explaining the Jewish theology, which is different. Because quite often you'll hear, especially missionaries, will say, this is what Christianity has over Judaism, is that in Judaism you can't have a personal relationship with God. In Christianity you do, and I disagree. I think you can have a personal relationship with the Creator of the universe without the Creator being reduced to any kind of avatar, because He spoke to us through His Torah, and the Torah is where the glory of God exists, that we can relate to on our own level. The Torah is perfect for that purpose of creating a relationship with God. And even we as imperfect beings can have God's grace through Torah, meaning we can learn humility through Torah. We can learn that we are sinners, and yet God still loves us and offers us tshuva as an opportunity to humble ourselves before God and to rectify our relationship with Him and to really strengthen that relationship on a higher level than it was even before we sinned. Just like we have in human relationships, that quite often when people who are in a relationship go through a difficult patch and they patch it up, it's stronger than it was before. We don't forget the pain that existed, but it becomes stronger, the relationship, because of the difficulties that we went through. And God created us that way. He understands us, He knows us, and that's how we are. Anyway, let's go back to what I want to talk about, history repeating itself. So I don't really know if I believe that history repeats itself all the time, and that's a blind rule. I do believe that there is mercy, and that we make choices, and sometimes, and God deals with us based on those choices. But also that there are these cycles and so forth. But yet the cycles can be broken. That's the whole message of Abraham changing his name. From Abram to Abraham, that when he was Abram, he was controlled by the cycles of the zodiac, astrology, and then when he changed his name, he was brought Lamala Miderech HaTeva. He became a supernatural being in a sense, and to the point where we are sanctified to be above nature, to be supernatural. That's what, the Talmud very famously says, Ein Mazel Yisrael, that the Jewish people have no mazel. So a lot of people think, it means we're shlemazel, that the Jewish people have bad luck. That's not what it means. It means that we do not operate under the stars. We are above the stars, and that only comes through Torah. That's not something that we're born with. That's something that we earn by virtue of living in accordance with God's will. And so therefore, when other people who are not Jewish also live according to God's will, they also can rescue themselves from the forces of nature, from astrology, meaning that it's generally, many have accepted, although not everyone accepts this, but it's generally accepted in Orthodox Jewish circles that astrology is a real thing, but we are rescued from it because of our allegiance to God in the Torah, by virtue of living a life of Torah, by virtue of believing in God and following what the Torah teaches in our lifestyle, in our ideology, and so forth. And since the Torah has a message for the whole world, there is a universal message, it could be said that nations can also be rescued from these, even though many people would disagree from a Kabbalistic standpoint or so forth. But I think it's quite possible to say that we can be rescued. Even people of other faiths can be rescued from these things by virtue of the message that we have, by virtue of living in accordance with God's will. Alright, some people might disagree, I don't know. So anyway, back to what I was saying. We can be rescued from these cycles. We're not doomed to repeat history. And I think perhaps we could say, back to General Santana's famous statement, it's not that history repeats itself, it's that we're doomed to repeat history if we don't learn from it. And what greater history do we have than the Torah? I know that's not what he meant, but perhaps that could be a meaning behind this, that the Torah is history, and history also has lessons of hashgacha pratis, of divine providence, and so forth. And by living in the proper way and so forth, we can be rescued from repeating the follies of history. Look, there have been so many good things in history, and God really does love us, and He really has mercy for us. I often think about a story that I read. This man wasn't from, although it seems from his father's Matseva that he grew up in a home that had some Torah in it. I'm not sure, I don't know. But he was Jewish, and he married Jewish, and but I don't know all of the history of how he lived his life. But Mo Howard from the Three Stooges, I read his autobiography many times. I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoy the Three Stooges. It's a guilty pleasure. Mo Howard writes, how do we know about the Three Stooges? Why are the Three Stooges so iconic in America? They really were not these big icons until the 1960s. Meaning they were making films they were in vaudeville in the 20s. They were making films in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s. But so were many other people, even for Columbia Pictures. I mean, many of the Stooges themselves, Shemp Howard made many Columbia Pictures shorts without the Stooges, as did Joe Besser, as did Curly Joe DeRita, without being the Stooges. Yet we don't see those. We do see, and we all know, and we all love the Stooges shorts. What happened? How did it happen? And it's really just a bit of hashgacha pratis, really, because these were forgotten. These were Columbia, because Mo, he didn't get any royalties. The Stooges didn't get any royalties for being on in the movies. They got paid, very underpaid, and Columbia Pictures making a lot of money, and the Stooges were not getting their fair share. Eventually, the Stooges, the Columbia Pictures sold these Stooges shorts to TV, expecting that no one would care about them, and they sold many others, and these became popular, and through that they became popular, and then the Stooges became popular, and Mo and Larry, and now with Curly Joe, I mean Shemp and Curly were gone, were able to reclaim their make a new system where they were famous, and there's hashgacha pratis in that, and the same thing, so we can have the same thing in our lives. Things could turn around when we least expect it. Now, in any event, so now what we're dealing with now with President-elect Trump, this is an opportunity for America to really turn around. This is a man who is not a big ideologue, not to the left, not to the right. He changes his mind a lot. He has a foot in every corner, in the left, the right, the center, all over. And he can, he wasn't my first choice, but I see he could bring America together. He could either upset everybody, both the left and the right, or he could bring everyone together. And it's not him, it's God. God picks our leaders, and so God put Donald Trump in this place for this reason. We don't know what God's plan is, but we don't deserve anything. But if, in a certain sense, if we deserve to be punished, we could be punished. If we deserve to be rewarded, or God decides to have grace on us and decides to reward us, decides to let us prosper, and we're going to use that prosperity for the glory of God as a nation, we could turn things around. Because we've had 8 years of just horrible past 8 years where we've been turning this country to Sodom and Gomorrah. And we can turn it all around. So let's hope and pray. And I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's hope and pray that things will be good. Because you know what? Even if Glenn Beck is a prophetic voice, bad prophecies don't have to come true. We know that from Jonah. Good prophecies do. So let's prepare for the worst, but hope for the best, and be cautiously optimistic, and look forward to good things ahead. And hopefully, eventually, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, if we listen to God's voice, but we never know when, that the whole world will be perfected and peace will reign in the whole world. Thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless.